Okay, so talk about the moment where you found out that you were pregnant and then the first time you spoke to Hunter about that.
It was a lot because, it's like I say in the book, I knew who was on the other end of that positive pregnancy test. And then you immediately, become consumed in these conspiracies and this fear and everything that comes with it. Because when I found out I was pregnant, I had two phones. One was AT&T and one was Sprint. And the reason I had to get another carrier is because my Arkansas phone didn't get service where I lived at in DC. So I ended up having two phones, two separate carriers. And after I found out I'm pregnant, I talked to my sister on the phone. She's, my lifeline, one of the first people I call. Um, Both phones crash at the same time. And it was eye-opening. It was terrifying because you think, I don't believe all these conspiracy theories that people have about politics and scandals, but if by chance, that anything about those are true, is this a coincidence? And if it's not a coincidence that this happened, then who would go this far to protect Hunter and how far would they go? And it became really, really scary. And I even avoided, telling Hunter there at the beginning to the point where I developed complications early on due to the stress level.
And you
And
talk, okay, go ahead.
oh no, I'm sorry.
No, finish what you were going to say.
And when I finally get it in there, I say, I wasn't scared to tell Hunt, this man that I'd grown to love and care about. I wasn't scared to tell him. I was terrified to tell Hunter Biden because, he's the one that his father was going to run for president and this political scandal. And it wasn't at that point it turned. I got in my head, this is like me telling almost a stranger because, I don't know what lies behind the politics and the scandals that come with them. And so I was terrified.
Right. And what was that conversation like when you did finally tell him?
I told him at his house in Annapolis that he was leasing at the time, and I'd actually brought one of our mutual friends to kind of be there just because I was scared. And she's in the bathroom, and people ask, why were you scared? Was it because he was he abusive? No, he didn't have a mean bone in his body. He went above and beyond to respect women at that point. In our situation, he respected me. He had never not. And I set him down and I tell him, and I always talk about people that watch Friends TV show. It's a lot like that because I tell him I'm pregnant and it's like Ross and Rachel. And when Rachel tells Ross that she's pregnant, it's just like blank, like, oh my God. And, his eyes are big and he's just looking at it. And she's like, and by the way, it's yours. I'll give you a little time to process that. And I just kind of like sit back and I'm just watching him. And then it just clicks. He's like, honey, I know it's mine. Why would you say that? Whatever you decide, I'll be here for you. I'll be here financially, emotionally, spiritually, whatever you decide, I'll respect that and I'll be here for you. And it was comforting, that conversation. It was, I talk about the intimacy that and I being more passionate because of that. It seemed like he was good with it. Everything was going to be okay. I was going to be safe. And, we were going to have a baby. And it's not instantly like, I've trapped him and now we got to get married type thing. It was like I could co-parent with my friend and raise this child. I didn't immediately think that we were just going to be together.
So how did you get from that moment to the point where you thought, okay, no one's going to know that this is a Biden and I'm going to have to go raise this child by myself in Arkansas?
So, Hunter's addiction was at a pretty high peak. And after I tell him that, there's that comfort and everything. And then there's a few times I see him and there's still a little comfort, but I schedule an ultrasound to listen to the baby's heartbeat for the first time. And I schedule it in Annapolis, so it's easier for him to get to. And he doesn't show up. And, I listen to the baby's heartbeat by myself. And after that, I'm at every doctor's appointment by myself. And I realize within the next month of that, he's becoming more distant and avoiding. And I know what that is. I've now become a burden to him. And, he's just kind of getting away from it, out of sight, out of mind. And one of the last times that I'd seen him, he brought up like finances and how he didn't have the money and blah, blah, blah. He was having to buy one of his children a laptop and he couldn't even afford that. And I knew he was making digs at me. And I was like, this is somebody that I've grown to love and care about. And I thought had grown to love and care about me because he's gotten to know me, but yet he's questioning my character right now. And
Right.
that was, really hurtful. And I even say, that's the last time I called him Hunt. After that, he was Hunter. When all the people that were close to him called him Hunt. And at that point, I was so offended. And in my head, I'm thinking, was this all a lie? Like everything. And I call him Hunter. I'm offended. And I'm like, I'm going to raise this baby on my own. And I talked to my dad. I decided I'm going to come home. And, my family knew who the child's father was, but we also knew that his father was going to be running for president. And the future of that itself is unknown. And so we wanted to keep it as quiet as possible. And I come back to Arkansas and there's so many people, so many rumors going around. I've been in this big city and I come back and people are like, oh, she's pregnant with this NBA player's baby, or her parents are hiding her in the attic. And it was like, no, I just am going through a very depressive time. I don't want to be out in public. And, it's hard because you take in this. Sometimes when you get pregnant, it's not a time to celebrate. Some women get pregnant and it's unplanned and it's scary. And, take in the fact that there's that abandonment. You feel alone. You don't have your family's there, but you're more alone than you've ever been. You're carrying a child to this man who's in such a dark place, and he's addicted, and his dad might run for president. And it's scary. It's terrifying.
I mean, I can totally understand that, Lunden. I feel like it's so evident to see how hurt you must have been. I know you talk in your book about struggling with suicidal thoughts during your pregnancy because of that. But, I can really understand that here is a guy, and again, from reading it, you laid out that you just love him. You care about him no matter who he is. And to find out that you're having his child and you're not necessarily looking for, anything more than just like validation of like, we can co-parent as friends, like you said, or continuing the relationship that you had. But it seemed that his addiction won, and continues to win in different circumstances. But, and that is very sad, not only for you, who was the young girl, that was going through being pregnant, but then for this child that ends up being without a father for no fault of her own or yours. And it's just a really sad circumstance what drug addiction does. I will just say, just to tell you, my father died of a cocaine overdose when I was 15.
Oh, so sorry.
Thank you. And my parents were divorced very young because of that whole thing. And it was very hard to get him to come around. He would say he was coming around. He would never show up. And I had to learn, and it took me years of therapy and doing all sorts of things to realize it wasn't him that didn't love me, and it wasn't that he chose the addiction over me, but half the time, more than half the time, it was the addiction speaking. It wasn't really him. And like you talk about Hunt versus Hunter, I do really understand that. And, I do hope for your daughter's sake that she does get some time and understanding of who her father is. But if she doesn't, that you spend enough time explaining to her that it's no fault of her own, and it's almost no fault of his, because that is what addiction does to people. And that's
I've talked about that. That's one of the main purposes of the book. It's solely dedicated to my daughter, and I want her to see what it was like to fall in love with her father, and the good and the bad that comes with it. I want her to be resilient. I want her to be forgiving. And in order to ask her to have those traits, I have to instill them in myself and be that example for her. And I truly believe that people don't understand addiction unless you've gone through it yourself, or you've loved and cared about someone who has. I didn't understand it until I fell in love with someone who suffered from addiction. And I want Navy, to be open-minded to that, and always, give people that grace, and know, especially people that are suffering from those sort of demons, to at least give that sort of grace to people, because it's needed. And, you talk about it's not any fault of her own. And the other day, she sees Trump on TV, and that's what she sees as her grandfather. She knows he's this political figure and he's the president, and she knows what he looks like. She picked, when we went to DC, a month or two ago, she got to pick one souvenir out of White House gifts, and she looked all over and bypassed the Barbies and everything. And then she's like, "Oh, I found it." And I was like, "Okay." And she threw it in. It was a little postcard with Joe's picture on it. And that's what she wanted. And so I'm like, "You want a picture? You know, are you sure you don't want a toy or anything?" She's like, "Nope, that's what I want. I want my grandpa." And I said, "Okay." And then, that picture is sitting on her dresser in her room because I give it to her when she gets home. That's where she puts it. And so she sees Trump on TV a few weeks ago, and she's like, "Mom, that's not my grandfather, is it?" And I'm like, "No, that's not him." And she says, fast forward to just a few days ago, she sees him again, and she says, "Mom, I don't think I'm ever going to ever be able to meet my grandfather." And I said, "Really? And why?" She said, "Because if he's as busy as that guy is, he's everywhere. So I'll never get to meet him." And I start laughing. I'm like, "Well, honey, it's because you're in Arkansas." But I tell her, if God meant for it to happen, it will. If not, maybe God's saving you from something greater. But all you can do is be in the moment that you're in now and live the life that you can, and know that it's not up to me and you. It's up to God if that happens. And I try to get her to rely more on faith during, those times. And after, she talks and she says, "Okay," she said, "but who I really, really want to meet?" And I said, "Who?" And she says, "My daddy. I just want to give him a big hug." And I was like, "Wow, he would love that." I try to do the most I can to let her know that she's, loved, and it's not her fault.
Yeah.